Anyone who's ever done anything worth doing has dreamed big, failed mightily, and mostly started from humble beginnings. This is a podcast about such people. The most fascinating podcast in the world is fascinating because of the stories of the human beings. Hello, everybody. It's Pat DeCerbo, the most fascinating podcast in the world. Nothing to do with me. It has to do with the people that agree to talk to me on the show. And today I'm with Angelo Vivolo. Angelo is a resident of Manhattan in New York City, and he was born and raised in Brooklyn, New York, by a father who was born in Italy and a mother who was born here, but is very Italian-American as well. Angelo was raised with an older brother and a younger sister, and he currently is married to Diane for 46 years. And Diane and Angelo have 2 sons and a daughter and 5 grandchildren. By way of background, Angelo is a graduate of Long Island University with a degree in education. He taught as a teacher for not quite 10 years in the public school system and went to graduate school at Hunter College and Brooklyn College and St. John's University in pursuit of a master's in teaching, and pretty much completed it, but not quite 100% when he decided to go into the restaurant business, which he swore he would never do from a young age. In fact, when he was raised, he and his family lived above his paternal grandfather's restaurant, and for many years he worked for the family for free, as I understand it, and eventually decided that he would become a teacher, excuse me, and not a restaurateur. Angelo is involved in philanthropic and charitable endeavors. He is on 6 boards currently, including CUNY in New York City, John Cabot University in Rome, Italy. He's on the board and a member of the Columbus Citizens Foundation on the Upper East Side. He's a president of the Columbus Heritage Coalition, president of the National Columbus Education Foundation, also the president of Francesco and Mary Giambelli Foundation, and recently nominated as a board member for the National Italian American Foundation, NIAF. Angelo is one of the busiest people I know. He's also one of the most generous people I know by both personal observation and reputation. We have lots of friends in common, and I'm delighted to have him here today. Welcome, Angelo.
Well, Pat, thank you for your very kind words. Uh, it's very nice of you to say what you've said. I am delighted to be with you, and I'm looking forward to our conversation. So go ahead and give me any questions you like, and I'll try to answer them the best I can. There'll be honest answers, that's for sure.
Terrific. You've kind of said this already, but your earliest memories, when you were 2 or 3 or 4 or 5 years old, what are your earliest memories of growing up in New York City?
Well, old-fashioned Italian family. My grandfather owned a restaurant in Brooklyn, and I was born and raised above that restaurant as a youngster. And the entire family worked at the restaurant. And as I said many times, I was blessed to have had that experience, even though my intention was not to go into the restaurant business. I don't know if I told you this, Pat, but my real goal in life was to be a professional baseball player. I played baseball in college, and boy, did I love the game. I still love the game. And a small anecdote in my career as a restaurateur, I got to meet many, many people, many celebrities of all, from political to actors, singers, you have. But I guess the most impressive person I ever met and who became a friend of mine was Joe DiMaggio. So the closest I ever really got to Yankee Stadium, aside from visiting, was to become a friend of Joe D's, and he was really a terrific guy, down to earth, very kind, First 2 years, Pat, I called him Mr. DiMaggio because I could not imagine calling him Joe. And he said to me, "Look, Angelo, I like your place, and I come in because I like it, and I like you. You got to call me Joe." I said, "Mr. DiMaggio, you're an icon. You're a person. Your picture's on the wall of my family's home in Brooklyn." He said, "No, no, no." He said, "Sit down and call me Joe." And then from that point on, for the next 8 years, when he came into the place, I'd sit with him. I've never sat with clients, but I sat with him for 5, 10 minutes, and all we talked about was baseball. And I think I know pretty much not every, but a lot of great Joe DiMaggio stories, which I cherish.
Hmm.
Oh, as a matter of fact, excuse me for interrupting, Pat, but last week I was in Florida, and I met with Mars Engelberg. Mars Engelberg is Joe DiMaggio's attorney, and was his attorney, and he's in charge of his estate. And there's no one who worshipped Joe DiMaggio more than Mars Engelberg, and still does. So it's full circle. And I was very blessed to know the great Joe DiMaggio.
That's fascinating. How did you get involved in baseball originally?
I was as a young youngster in the neighborhood. Everyone played baseball. I loved baseball, and I played it throughout high school and college. I played baseball. I was very fortunate to go to the College World Series when I was a senior in at Long Island University. But as you know, I didn't make the grade, but I still loved the game and got to know a lot of baseball players. But as I said, the most impressive and who really, truthfully, became a friend of mine was Joe DiMaggio.
When you say you didn't make the grade, what does that mean?
Well, I guess I didn't hit well enough. I'm a pretty good fielder. I was a catcher, and I and I at that position I covered very well. But excuse me, excuse me. But you know, I just didn't have it. I didn't have what they wanted. You know, uh, I I dedicated myself to the game all the years of being. Oh, by the way, even after I graduated college, I played baseball, not professionally, but I played in what they in leagues of where they had people of my age playing. So, and like I said, I still love the game and I watch as much baseball as I can. Thank God the Yankees are having a good season so far, at least
I can't get
first
my
four
hopes
games.
up.
Yeah, well, hope lives eternal, as they say.
No, the reason I asked about you didn't make the grade, the way you put it, it's funny because so many people say that. Like I'm a student of high level athletes, mostly wrestling, but I've been a baseball aficionado my whole life. But there's a wrestler in our office, and when he graduated high school, he had 235 wins and 5 losses. So he was the winningest wrestler in high school history in America. Then he went on to college and he was a one time All American, never an NCAA champ, and never wrestled internationally at that point. So in his mind, he didn't make the grade. Like, is that really true though? I kind of think compared to me, he made the grade. You know, it's really interesting. Like you could always do better. In your words, maybe didn't make the grade meant you didn't end up playing for the Yankees. That's kind of how I took it
Well, I didn't end up playing professionally.
professionally, right?
That's really the point.
But would you have
But
played anywhere else or only for the Yankees?
I would have played anywhere else for the Yankees. No question, no doubt. I but as I said, I enjoyed the game, and I knew my limits at that time. I went to professional tryouts and saw other players. But you know, it's a lot of things that are involved in being successful in anything you do,
Mm-hmm.
and one of them is luck.
Amen.
So, but I've been very lucky in life, and I have no complaints about anything.
Mm, that's great to be able to say. So you were you got involved in baseball as a young child, and then how did you decide on LIU? Did they recruit you for baseball or?
Uh, there were two places I wanted to go when I graduated from high school. It was either St. John's University or Long Island University. And the coach at the time at Long Island University was a guy by the name of Russo, Italian American. He had a great reputation, and that was the school that I wanted to go to. So I went. I didn't play my freshman year. but I did play from sophomore year on, and I was very happy playing baseball. And then I got involved in school politics. I became the president of the school of my college in my senior year. So I you have to remember I'm an antique. I went to college in the '60s.
Mm.
Uh, you know, so I went to college. I graduated from LIU in 1968, and I graduated on a Friday. I went to work on a Monday at a high school in Queens, and I was there. Interesting story. I think I told you this, Pat. I
Hmm.
think I've told you pretty much everything in my life. I my grandfather, who owned the restaurant, had a friend in the board of education, and he said, "Oh, I got my grandson need a job. What do you got?" And he said, "Carmine." My grandfather's name was Carmine, and he said, "Send him to me. I think I have a job for him." So I went to work in Queens at a school, Woodrow Wilson Vocational High School. I took the place of someone on leave, and so I worked for a month there. After working there for a month, the chairman of the department, his name was Dom Torpe, I'll never forget. He offered me a permanent job at the school. So, of course, get a permanent job. I said, absolutely, thank you so much. During that summer, I received a letter from a local high school that I had attended as a youngster called Lafayette High School. And the person who sent me the letter said, I have a job for you. And I lived exactly 1.5 blocks from the Lafayette High School. But I was I was taught if you give your word, you got to keep your word. So instead of taking the job a block and a half away from my high school, I took the job at Woodrow Wilson Vocational High School in Queens, and I maintained my obligation or my commitment, and I stayed there until 2 years later they closed the school down.
Mm.
And then I was transferred out, and guess where I ended up? Back to Lafayette High School in
Mm.
Brooklyn. So it all worked out in the end.
What were you teaching?
I started out, of course, my first love was a baseball coach. So I started out as a phys ed teacher, and then I ended up in guidance, and I was the dean of students
Mm.
at Lafayette High School. I was I wasn't the disciplinarian, but I was in charge of those kids who needed discipline, and it was really more the parents that needed the discipline than the students.
That
made
hasn't
many phone,
changed.
made many phone calls home and not finding the kind of responsibility that I really uh, anticipated.
Mm.
But it was a challenge, and I did it, and I enjoyed doing it.
So at some point, you you had an opportunity to get back into the restaurant business, so to speak.
Well, yeah, I did. I did that on my own. I
Hmm.
decided I was going to do it, and
How did you do it?
well, first I first I had was introduced to someone who wanted to open a restaurant on 61st Street and between Madison and Park Avenue. A guy who I got to know through a friend, and he was looking for a partner. And so I became his partner, and he didn't really know very much about the restaurant business, but I worked at the restaurant, and after a year, or maybe even less, I we had parted ways very peacefully, and I then went on my own, looked for locations, and opened my first restaurant that I owned by myself on East 74th Street between Lexington and Park Avenue, and I was there for 42 years. The name of the restaurant was obviously Vivolo,
Hmm.
my last name, and I had a very wonderful career there. And then I opened other restaurants in addition to that.
How many
But that was
years was that?
42.
Wow. In restaurant years, that's like dog years, right? So that would be like 200 years.
Yeah, for sure, for sure. I was very blessed, very fortunate. And the irony is that it was a brownstone,
Mm.
and the first two floors were a restaurant, and the top two floors were my apartment.
Mm.
So my wife and I said my wife of 46 years, we had three children. And they were all born and raised above the restaurant. It's kind of similar to what I did, except I was in Brooklyn and they were
Mhm.
in Manhattan. And they all went to private schools. I went to public school.
Mm, that's interesting. So, what do you remember from when you first started in the brownstone? How did you, were you renting it or did you buy it or how did?
I had what they called a triple net lease,
Mhm.
which which is I was responsible for everything and anything in terms of the building, from repairs to taxes, whatever happened. And my landlord they would get X amount of dollars, and they had no responsibility whatsoever in terms of maintenance or anything that had to do with the building. So for them, it was the golden goose because I was one of those old-fashioned guys who did the tried to do what I think other Italian Americans try to do in their lives every day, and all Americans try to do what's right and what's correct and live up to your obligations, and that's what I did.
Hmm.
But I have no complaints. I had a wonderful 42 years there. My kids were all born and raised there, and all went to great schools. So yeah, that was my experience.
And that's the restaurant where Joe DiMaggio would come?
Joe DiMaggio and many others that frequented because of the also the neighborhood that it was in.
Mm-hmm.
You know,
Upper
but
East Side.
yes, Upper East Side.
Right.
Yes,
So, tell me, I wanted to go back to Joe DiMaggio if it's okay.
sure.
Um, Tell me like some interesting stories about him or like heartwarming stories. What would people want to know that people are unlikely to know about Joe DiMaggio?
I can tell you one thing, which if someone tells you I had dinner with Joe DiMaggio, I would ask that person, well, at the end of the meal, what did he? How did he drink his coffee? Joe DiMaggio was a child of the Depression, so I guess in those years they had a spread, stretch everything. He would have a pot of coffee next to him, and he'd have a pot of hot water. He put a little hot water in his cup, a little coffee in his cup, then followed by a little hot water. And that's how he drank his coffee.
Hmm.
Very unusual, but I guess you could understand that's how he was brought up and to, stretch things. And that's what he did. As far as his personality, from my experience, he was always a gentleman, always dressed well. Never heard him use any foul language. Maybe not in my company, at least. And we only spoke about baseball. Everyone asked the question, "Oh, how about Marilyn Monroe?" Well, first of all, Marilyn Monroe was long gone, and secondly, I knew that Joe DiMaggio, that was a very, very tender subject for him. If someone would talk to him about that, he'd get up and probably leave. But as I said, he was a gentleman, and I was flattered that I even knew him, let alone became a friend. So, and I would walk him out the door until someone would meet him with a car. And if someone came by and wanted his autograph, I would like kind of put them away. But Joe would say, "Nah." So that story about him not wanting to give autographs is also, in my experience, is nonsense.
Mm-hmm.
He was a gentleman in every way. I think at the end, he was kind of a sad guy because a lot of his friends had passed, and he had a couple of close friends in baseball and out of baseball. But easygoing. Didn't food wise, he liked cheese, he liked olives, liked sweets, but he was not a fan of garlic.
Mm.
So these are all kind of little things that if you want to know about Joe DiMaggio, and someone says, "Oh, I really knew him. I went out with him." These are the things these are the true stories. Actually, the person who introduced me to Joe DiMaggio was his dearest friend, Dr. Rock Positano. And Rock, who is to this day a dear friend of mine, uh, he wrote a book, Dinner with Joe DiMaggio, and I'm in the book about 4 or 5 times at least. Not that I was the only restaurant he came to, but I was one. Oh, the other great story about Joe D for me was he was the Grand Marshal of Columbus Day Parade, and at the end of the Mass at St. Patrick's Cathedral, the Grand Marshal and the honorees would go through the to the residence, which is connected to the cathedral. the residence of the Cardinal. And so we went into the residence, and I had my 12-year-old son with me at the time, Frank. And we were standing in the residence in one corner, and he was in the other corner, surrounded by people just wanting to talk to him and so forth. And I couldn't tell you how flattered I was. He left that group, and he came over to my son and I, and he said, "Let's take a photo."
Hmm.
And I have that photo till this day. So it's a great memory. I never asked Joe for his autograph, and I never asked Joe to take a photo with him. However, when he did pass, uh, his estate, and I never asked for anything, but his estate gave me two baseballs
Wow.
with Joe DiMaggio's signature on. So I have two grandchildren. One goes to each, and they'll know that when I'm long gone, they have to keep that baseball and not sell it to anybody.
Mm.
That has to go on for generations after generations. So that's a true story. That's my Joe DiMaggio story.
Well, it's funny because I've read a little bit about him in various baseball books and stuff, and he seems famously private, probably misunderstood. People say he's rude and stuff, but probably just wanted to mind his own business. I'm thinking you would know way better than most people, right? I mean, sounds to me
Well,
like you met him hundreds and hundreds of times.
well, not hundreds, but many times,
Mm-hmm.
many times, and personally,
Mm-hmm.
I can tell you this one other quick Joe DiMaggio story.
Mm-hmm.
Several, about 6 weeks, maybe, or maybe a little bit longer after Joe D passed, uh, we had a mass at St. Patrick's Cathedral in his honor. And after the mass, about 35 of us went across the street. At the time, the Cirque had a restaurant there, and there were many baseball players. There was Steinbrenner, of course, and other celebrities there. Yogi Berra, all people I loved. And so we got up to say a few words, but the most impressive to me was Kissinger. Kissinger got up and he said, over the years I've met many celebrities, many dignitaries, many people, but he said I'll never forget on the 75th anniversary of Time magazine, they asked Joe DiMaggio, because he was a cover, to sit at the celebration with the President Clinton, and Joe DiMaggio refused. He was not a fan of Clinton. However, he said, "I will sit with Henry Kissinger." So Kissinger said it was the greatest honor of his life to sit with Joe DiMaggio at that dinner. So this is a I can't make this stuff up. This is exactly what I heard.
Oh man.
Unfortunately, may he rest in peace. Henry Kissinger just passed away a couple of months ago
Yeah,
at 100 years old.
this is pretty impressive. Um,
Very impressive.
Sometimes I used to go to was it the Four Seasons? I think he had a table there. He was there every day for lunch, I think.
I wouldn't be surprised.
But did he tell you why uh, Joe DiMaggio? Did he mention why Joe DiMaggio was not a fan of Mr. Clinton, President Clinton?
No, no. He wasn't. No, that I knew that for a long while. To be honest with you, before even that. However, uh, I Kissinger came here as a youngster, and he loved baseball.
Mm,
And he told a story about how he used to sit out in the bleachers, watching Joe DiMaggio and how impressed he was with him. That's how enamored he became of Joe DiMaggio and his ability as a player and so forth and so on. So
it's interesting. What other interesting people did you meet in the restaurant that might be make for interesting conversation?
oh my goodness, I once made a list of about 110 people. In the beginning, when I first opened the restaurant, I was newly married. Actually, I was very smart. I got married a couple of weeks after we opened the restaurant. We were married. I opened the restaurant September 23rd. My wife and I, Denise, by the way, we got married on October 15th. We went on a honeymoon for a week. I was the most nervous honeymooner going because of the restaurant. But over the years, the beginning especially, she worked by my side, greeting people and so forth. And we would keep a running list of celebrities that would come in. So I made that list. I mean, I can go read it to you, but I'll tell you one who very impressive was Rod Stewart. Rod Stewart would come in when he was in New York after doing a concert at Madison Square Garden, and he was a very unassuming guy, really nice guy, but he would come in sometimes with a date, and sometimes with his family, and sometimes with his bandmates. And he would come in very late, and he'd sit in the back of the room until everyone was gone, and they'd have a good old time of singing not popular songs, but songs from where they grew up. And one particular night, Rod Stewart got up and he's ready to leave. He's got the limo outside, and he's dancing across the floor of the restaurant in all the way to the outside. And I call up to my wife because we had lived above the restaurant those days, and I said, Denise, you got to look out the window. Rod Stewart's dancing in the street, and it's a true story. But very nice guy.
Mm.
I, you know, I'm going to be remiss if I mention one and not mention them all, I guess. But from Debbie Reynolds to Milton Berle to Rock Hudson to oh my God, in the beginning, Ginger Rogers was a pretty. Remember, I opened in 1977. This is a long time ago.
Mm-hmm.
Ginger Rogers and Ethel Merman and oh, great guy, great guy. Oh my God, there are a lot of great guys. I'm trying to. Oh my goodness, the dance band. Oh, I'm blank. Sorry,
Not
but
Patrick Swayze.
no, no Patrick Swayze. No, no, no. But you know, uh, I'd have to read the names.
It's okay.
I,
So,
I can go.
as far
I'm
as
sorry.
like the your other efforts at this point, post professional, I guess I would say. These are professional but volunteer. How did you get involved on the board at CUNY? And I think you said that's the organization that needs your time the most, and they got a lot going on. And I think you told me there's over 200,000 students in one way or another that are matriculated at.
200 right now, right, as of this semester, there's 209,000 at the moment, but the spring semester is always less than the fall semester. At one time, CUNY had 272,000 students. However, over the last 10 years, because of demographics, because of less 18-year-olds, because of more people wanting to go to work
Mm-hmm.
rather than to go to school, and because CUNY is open to everyone. So retention sometimes is difficult because there are people who attend who really may not are not ready for attending. I think that's another reason why the CUNY is going to be changing some of the requirements and also some of the practices. Instead of getting a degree, maybe getting a certificate instead of going for a MA or MS, or for going for, I'm sorry, BA or BS, go for a certificate in a particular area that is needed, but not necessarily a college degree.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's the way of the world going forward in higher education. It's not what it was when I went to school. Uh, I couldn't get into CUNY. The average was so high, and I was okay student, but I wasn't CUNY level
Mm-hmm.
of student. And for some of your listeners, they may not believe this, but this is the fact. In the years that I applied in the 60s, a woman had to have a higher average than a man
Mm.
in order to be accepted into CUNY. Can you imagine that? Can you imagine that?
I don't think that's allowed
Uh,
anymore.
no, I don't think so. I don't think so. But yeah, CUNY has a $4.2 billion budget, and there are a lot of responsibilities that go along because as obviously life has become more expensive, and 4.2 billion last year doesn't cover what's needed this year. So
Mm.
unfortunately, there are things that need to be done to curtail, rather to respect the budget. And right now, as you know, the budget in Albany hasn't even been finished yet. But how I got involved in CUNY, I have to give credit to former Governor Andrew Cuomo. Over the years, and the governor became a friend of mine. He knew of my involvement in the Italian American community, and he decided to nominate me as the first Italian American to be nominated, or rather to become a member of the trustees in over 20 years.
Mm.
Now, maybe over 20, 23, 24 years. The last time someone of Italian American descent was on the board. I went before the Committee on Higher Education in Albany. I went before the Committee on Finance, and then I went before the entire assembly because he could nominate you, but that doesn't mean you're going to be elected.
Mm-hmm.
So I was elected to the board, and I've been a proud member over the last 2 years. I've become more of a vocal member now than I was in the beginning because I always feel you have to create relationships and people have to know who you are before you can get your point across.
Mm.
I was very, very uh, dissatisfied with what happened last year, the year before rather, in terms of the graduating ceremony at the CUNY Law School, where a student spoke, terribly anti-Semitic speech, totally anti-Semitic, not only against Jews but against Israel. And look, I believe that everyone has an opinion and First Amendment rights. However, you speak about, and if it were my decision to tell this student what to do, it would be talk about how you're going to change the world. Talk about the abilities you have to change the world. Talk about who you're going to influence and how you're going to influence them. But don't speak against one particular religion or one particular country. I don't think that I don't think that's part of First Amendment rights.
Mm.
They say, well, First Amendment rights. The only thing you can't do is yell fire in a theater. Well, that's not totally true in my view. Excuse
Mm.
me. Then this year was worse. But this year someone else at the law school, and look, no one's happy with the way things are in the world, or at least my view of things are in the Middle East, of course, or other places. But speaking against one doesn't help the other. So I believe the old adage, two wrongs don't make a right.
Mm-hmm.
So, in any event, what I'm saying is that I am a little bit more vocal. I'm non-political. I'm not going anywhere. I'm not looking for elective office. I'm not looking for any contracts. I'm not looking for. I'm just looking to do what in my view, in my opinion, is the right and just and proper thing to do. I know, Pat, you've read some of the things I've
Oh,
written
yeah.
about this subject. So,
So
you
that
know,
leads nicely into my next question, which is
okay,
the lion's share of the charities that you're involved with involve Italian American groups and Italian American causes. How did you end up getting involved in the first such group, and where has that led you?
great question. Well, I was. I became a member of the Columbus Citizens Foundation uh, actually 37 years ago. I was nominated by a good friend at the time, still a good friend, Vincent Tisi. He nominated me, and I became a member. And I was, I was living in Manhattan and not in Brooklyn, in an Italian American neighborhood. I wanted my children to be exposed to, accomplished Italian Americans, and that's the membership of the Columbus Citizens Foundation. So in the for many years I would attend events with my kids. Of course, the Columbus Day Parade, which I like to call the National Columbus Day Parade because it's the largest display of Italian heritage and culture in the country, maybe in the world. And so I would take my wife and my kids, and we'd attend and give them some exposure. And then later in years, I was nominated to be president of the foundation, and in my second year as president, uh, our mayor at the time wanted to do away with the uh, with the Columbus statue in Columbus Circle, and so at that point, I really became even more active in preserving the Columbus Circle, preserving Columbus Day, and it kind of naturally kept on going from there. I became a vocal individual about it, and I've been fortunate to have a lot of good friends who support me and support not only me, but support the Italian heritage and culture. I believe if you offend one culture, one heritage, you offend all. So I want to protect our culture, my heritage, but I also want to protect others. And I think, this year you go after Italians, next year you probably go after somebody else. And the other thing that I say all the time is that if you say a lie enough times, people believe it to be the truth. And unfortunately, Pat, that's what's happened with Christopher Columbus.
Mm.
There's so many lies out there about this man, and it was perpetrated by Howard Zinn, who did this many years ago. Wrote a book, and he was a communist. He was anti-American, anti-everything, but especially anti-Columbus. And unfortunately, our academia thought this was a great book, and they kept on repeating the lies that he put out. And you could write laws, you can do whatever you want, but public opinion does not change so easily. And I believe that if you are forthright and you are truthful and you present uh, in the right proper way, people will come around and appreciate the truth. Unfortunately, it's a hard. It's not easy. We're challenged all the time. I can go over with bore your audience with all of the challenges we're up against right now. But I'm happy to say that there are. I'm not alone. There are many people like myself who are supporting our heritage, our culture, and are doing what is right to get the truth out.
Mm-hmm.
You know, uh, and we don't want to be marginalized. There's no reason.
Right.
I'm disappointed at some of the things that have gone on nationally. And statewide. That there's a woman in Queens. Her name is Ramos, Jessica Ramos, who has a bill in Albany trying to do away with Columbus Day. Fortunately, it hasn't gone anywhere. There's a bill in Congress that's looking to do away with Columbus Day. That hasn't gone anywhere. However, if we're not vigilant and we don't speak up, we're going to be marginalized,
Mm.
and we're going to just be walked over. And I don't think that's the right thing to do. Look, no one justifies anything that was done in the past that was bad, but for sure, Christopher Columbus didn't kill millions of people. He didn't do genocide, as they like to put on his neck. He didn't invent slavery. He didn't have slaves. I mean, there's a book by. Now you have me on my soapbox.
Mm.
If there's a book by Delaney, I think her first name was Mary Delaney, the title of the book, and by the way, a very accomplished professor, nationally known anthropologist, and Carol Delaney, her name is. And the book she wrote is uh, Christopher Columbus in Search of Jerusalem. Christopher Columbus was an evangelist. He believed in Catholicism and believed in Christianity, and that's what he thought he was doing. Uh, uh, so, and then there are other pieces. I mean, there's a book by a woman named Mary Grabar, and I think it's an outstanding book because it turns around and points at all the lies that were written by Howard Zinn, and he and she has a very very authentic book that counteracts everything that he said. And so I can go on and on and on. We can talk about Columbus in in perpetuity, but as I said, key is must respect everyone. Do I believe that indigenous people should have a day? Of course they do. And there is one, August 9th, and there's Native American Day the day after Thanksgiving. But if they want another day, God bless them. They should have it. But it didn't have to take away Columbus Day to have it. So I think that's a reasonable approach. I think people who are reasonable will understand that. And this whole thing about slavery and Columbus, that, he, he, slavery, slavery existed way before Columbus got to the States.
Mm-hmm.
Not to the States. He never came to the States. Oh, by the way, it's another thing that my Latino friends should be happy about. Columbus brought Spanish culture, brought Spanish language to the Americas. I mean, that's how South America became, a haven for the uh, Latin culture. So, anyways, I'm sorry, Pat.
Oh,
Next
not at
question.
all. Um, so when you think in terms of what's next for Angelo Vivolo,
More conversations with you, I guess. That's for sure.
I hope so.
Uh, I hope so. I just want to live a good life. Be truthful and honest in the way I live, and speak the truth, and hopefully, you know, look. In life, there's compromise always, but you can't compromise the truth. You know. However, there has to be. You have to have the ability to hear both sides of a story. And you have to. You can't attack. You have to. You have to be open minded, and hopefully people, fair-minded people, will do what they think is right. Of course, number one is my family, my wife, my children, my grandchildren. I want to give them a great example of living a life well lived, but an honest and pure life. So I'm not going on another board if that's your question.
I was thinking you might have your hands. You might be busy enough at this point. Um, is there anything that I'm leaving out? Anything you might like to say or ask me before we wrap up today?
Okay, well, before I ask you, I'm going to make a little pitch here. Uh, on April 17th, it will be the 500th anniversary of Giovanni da Verrazzano's discovery of the uh, New York Harbor, actually 80 years before Hudson ever came to that area. And so on April 17th, in Battery Park in New York City, where there is a statue of Verrazzano. We're going to have a celebration. I've invited Governor Hochul. I've invited Mayor Adams. I've invited the Consul General of Italy, Fabrizio Di Michele. I've invited the French Consul General because, believe it or not, Verrazzano did his voyage under the French flag. So, out of respect for the French, we're bringing them there. And then I have to give kudos to the New York City Park and Recreations uh, Commission and the commissioner, Susan Donahue. She has been very collaborative in having her people, her staff, work with us in terms of having the statue really looking good and the area all primed. It's a little difficult right now because there's construction going on in the area. However, it will not prevent us from having a very, very, very good showing. And also, there's a good friend and a guy in charge of the volunteer, of course, downtown, Frank Bizignano, who was offered to be part of this celebration, and so we're very grateful for that. So, in terms of what's up and what's next, that's pretty much the immediate future. I can go on and on about different events, but we'll stop at that. And Pat, I guess my question to you is your podcast. Uh, how do you envision our conversation being received by those listening?
Well, I mean, it's hard to debate anything you've said. I mean, you're speaking from the heart. You're speaking in the first person. I think, first of all, it's a great American story. It's you're a first generation, well, first or second, depending how you look at it, generation Italian American from modest means, I would say, and you enjoyed a great career. You worked real hard. You studied hard before that. You played baseball, America's game. I didn't hear a mention of apple pie, but I'm sure that's coming. um, I, I just think you're a very interesting person. The first time we talked at Il Gattopardo, I think, was the first extended conversation, and I find you fascinating. So I'm thinking other people will too. It's the podcast is sort of new. I think I may have mentioned I started it in the fall. I think October and November. I think I've done about 25 of them so far. So it's been a brisk pace. Like today, I had 3 scheduled, so you're my third today, and then I'll be done. But I get lots of positive feedback. It's not as though I have millions of listeners, but you never know. It might get to that point. So you might get to be even more famous than you are now. You never know. And then Columbus will, his uh, story will be more well known and hopefully clarified substantially by your remarks. And you just never know what the future holds. I'm hoping everyone will see your podcast, and who knows, maybe they'll get more involved in supporting the saving of the Columbus statue, which to me makes sense too. I'm not sure. I feel like in general, I'm not. This wouldn't be about Columbus in particular. I just feel like a lot of people in the public eye feel compelled to right wrongs that they view as existing and unfortunate in some way. But I often wonder, like, are they really doing it to right a wrong, or are they doing it because they can promote their agenda that might be different from righting the wrong they're talking about? And I think that's particularly true of most people that are trying to sell something, including politicians. And I see nothing wrong with trying to sell things. Obviously, I'm in sales, but um, I don't know. I think Columbus's problem has more to do with people trying to get on TV and make a splash than it does with Columbus. So hopefully, with you and your remarks today, maybe that the noise around Columbus will abate a little bit. But my
Well,
listenership is limited. I will tell you that it's new.
well, and growing and growing. So I wish you all the best, and I thank you for this privilege of being with you this last hour and talking about things that are dear and close to my heart. And hopefully, your listeners, whoever or how many,
Thank you.
get to enjoy it and appreciate what I've had to say.
So I'm in the habit of asking one last question, which you kind of answered, but I'll ask it again. I like to say that the hyphen is the most important punctuation because it's between our date of birth and our date of death. If you were, if your great great grandchildren who never knew you, if you wanted to let them know what Angelo Vivolo was all about, what would you want them to know about you?
I say that he was an honest man who loved his family.
Amen.
Okay. Well,
Well, thank you for your time. And I look forward to seeing you at the CCF and around town. And I hope we can go to lunch again soon.
I hope so as well. Well, listen, thank you so much for this opportunity. God bless, and God bless your audience, and all the best.
Thank you. Bye bye.
Bye bye.
If you enjoy the most fascinating podcast in the world, please follow on Spotify, subscribe on YouTube, and follow on Apple Podcast.